Alright, hello everyone. Welcome to our panel, Shining a Better Light on Dōjin Circles. My name is Michael.
I'm Josh, or B.
And we're both going to be presenting on behalf of our studio, Cozy Grove Studios. We'll talk more about the studio towards the end of these slides. However, we are very invested into indie cultures from around the world. Now, please raise your hand if you know what Dōjins are in here. Alright, we seem to have quite a few people who are knowledgeable about the subject. However, we might have a few people who might not know what Dōjins are, so let's go ahead and describe a little bit about them. So basically, Dōjins are kind of like groups of people who share similar interests and hobbies. They're kind of like a clique or fandom. However, within Dōjin communities, they call them circles. Basically, many groups or circles create self-published content. These works are basically Dōjin works as well as basically indie works. So basically, a lot of the indie content, such as like music and video games that we see in the West, that's basically a similar culture in Japan as well. And does anyone know what that symbol right there means? That is like a universal okay symbol for like it's okay to use my work for your own independent creations. This was basically meant to avoid legal problems, since throughout the history of like self-published works, there's been a lot of people who made fandom works of like various materials. Due to like copyright and all that unfun legal stuff, a lot of people did get in trouble for making Dōjins based off of pre-established works because they were like making money off of them. However, Ken Akamatsu, who used, I think his manga was UQ Holder, in 2013, he tried developing this symbol to say that it was okay, with the okay symbol on it, to make work off of his work. But yeah, before we go into the history of Dōjin media, I thought to go ahead and introduce the different types of Dōjin. One of the most common forms of Dōjin is Dōjinshi, which is printed works such as novels, magazines, and manga. And for example, right here we have three famous works within the genre. The works of Hanya, which is a really good independent artist from Japan. Basically, they won several awards for their self-reflective manga. We also have Afro Samurai, which is a really cool short story about samurai in a revenge story, as well as My Brother's Husband, which Josh could maybe describe a little bit more about that story.
Yeah. Usually when I was doing around, searching around Dōjins who are more safe for work, but also more for the LGBT people of that range. Sorry, it has been a very long day. But as soon as I saw this, I'm like, finally, some food. But honestly, I was reading a little bit of it, and I really enjoyed the story. And I was really hoping to have this being shown in the spotlight, to have some representation of people who are in the queer community.
Yeah. And also another form of Dōjin that is within this umbrella of this culture is Dōjinsoft, which is basically a video game. Classic examples of this would be Tsukihime, the When They Cry series, before it really took off in popularity with the anime and manga. Yume Nikki, which is a very well, I would say that's obscure, but it seems like a lot of people know what Yume Nikki is within the RPG horror maker community. However, it was developed by one person and self-published by them as well. A similar game that was self-published is Toho. Even though there's a lot of materials of Toho out there, it's still made by one person, Zun, who is a really good musician, game developer, and artist in general. There's also the convenience store by Chilla's Art that also I include within the Dōjinsoft umbrella. It's a lot more of a newer example of a Dōjin media. However, since Chilla releases their work by themselves independently, I include that within the Dōjin umbrella. Do you have any Dōjinsoft games you'd like to shout out, Josh?
Actually, again, connecting to Yume Nikki and the RPG horror style type of era where when you were a kid or younger, you would watch these YouTubers play it. Things like Eve, Mad Father, and around that genre and area of the RPG horror games are essentially more indie-based and also Dōjins. And I was surprised because I was looking at what really counts as a Dōjin? And I'm oh, I see people play these. Yeah, this counts as Dōjin. Okay.
Yeah. Alright, and the next type of Dōjin I would like to talk about is Dōjin Ongaku. This is something I did do a lot of research on before this panel. However, a lot of Vocaloid songs, especially those made by independent producers online, are considered Dōjin Ongaku. One of my favorite bands, Kisebi Kyobi and Akasobi Rockets, They're considered a Dōjin group, and they've been featured in anime such as Gate and High School of the Dead. Does anyone know what High School of the Dead is in here? We all watch it for the zombies, right? And yeah, a lot of Dōjin ongaku artists actually do a lot of covers of Toho songs and make fan songs for Toho. Toho is basically a big part of Dōjin culture, so it'd be a crime not to mention it several times throughout a panel. And there's one more type of Dōjin that I'm going to bring up, Arrow Dōjin. We are not talking about this today, though, because we're talking about the Dōjinshi that kind of takes up a lot more of the whole culture of Dōjin in general. Basically, yeah, a lot of Dōjin that we see here in the West are of this genre. However, for this panel, we want to shine a better light of the indie communities of Japan and share that there's a lot of independent work in Japan that is very good. Even though, of course, we're not saying that the RA teamwork is terrible for any reason. We're just saying that there's a lot more work out there. All right. So we're going to begin off with a slight history lesson before we talk about our favorite Dōjins. All right. So we're going to go all the way back to the Meiji period, which is basically like the 1800s of Japan after they opened up to the rest of the world. There's a lot of historical context that I could get into, but I don't think people want a huge history lesson today. We're here to talk about Dōjin. However, it was heavily influenced by the work of waka artists. Waka is basically a general term for poetry during this period that encompasses genres such as Katao-ka, which is like lines of poetry that go from 5-7-7, and Tanka, which is 5-7-5-7-7. It's kind of like haiku, but it's a bit longer and a bit different from the syllable tree of the poems. Basically, these groups self-published a lot of their magazines of their waka works. One of the examples of this was Meiroku Zashi. It was not technically a literary magazine, however, it was a collaborative effort to promote further use of the Japanese language within the whole culture of Japan during the Meiji period. They're basically trying to, encourage educational research within their own cultures. And then there was Ozaki Koyo's Kendusha, Ozaki Koyo, I was mixing up the name. Koyo was a Japanese author and poet who is also known for making the work the Tajo Takon, or Tears of Regrets. Does anyone recognize Tears and Regrets? Very old literary work. And we're going to make a lot of references to old literary work, so if people seem a little intimidated, that is okay. I kind of expected that. And they also made the Konjiki Yasha, which is the Golden Demon. Not familiar with anyone? Ah, dang. I'm going to get someone one day with one of these. But yeah, they basically, Ozaki Koyo made the Garenkuka Bunko, which is actually technically considered one of the first Dōjin magazines that is full of poems as well as literary works of the time. There was not a lot of manga during this era, there were drawings included, however, we have not really gotten into the manga era. However, the manga era happened after the American occupation period, where Japan had a little bit more money after the, period after World War II. That's a whole historical thing that I'm not going to get to in this panel. However, this culture really truly rise after this period, and it was heavily inspired by the movement of Shishosetsu, or the I novels. Does anyone know what I novels are? Is anyone familiar with the name Osamu Dazai? No one's a Bungo Stray Dogs fan? I felt like that was a reference people got. Basically, Osamu Dazai made a really personal poetry called No Longer Human. For No Longer Human, he basically did a very self-reflective story of his life. Welcome to panel. Feel free to sit anywhere you like. But yeah, it's one of his most famous examples of this sort of Shishosetsu movement. I novels, in short, are basically novels that are focusing on the personality and personal lives of the people telling these stories. It's basically I did this, I think this. It's very into the close to the human psyche. It was very influenced by the naturalism movement in literature in the 19th century, and it was transferred over to Japanese media. Also, Dōjin circles really started forming with Shotaro Ishimori. Shotaro Ishimori is known for Super Sentai, Kamen Rider, and Cyborg 009. He's considered as one of the greatest mangakas of all time, and he helped Osamu Tezuka for assisting with his manga, Astro Boy. Does anyone know what Astro Boy is? Alright, we're getting to media that people are starting to recognize. And yeah, another group that did start making their Doujin circles really early on within the Doujinshi era is Fujiko Fujio. This name may sound familiar to anyone who knows the story of Doraemon. Fujiko Fujio is actually not one person, as I learned recently. It's actually two people, Hiroshi Fujimoto and Moto Abiko. Basically, you probably know Fujiko Fujio a little bit more than these two other guys. But yeah, they made their first Doujin circle called Fujiko's First Manga Party. And through these works in literary magazines throughout time, it led up to Comic Cat. Does anyone know what Comic Cat is? Alright, for anyone who does not know what Comic Cat is, let me introduce it. Comic Cat is the largest doujinshi convention in the entire world that is run semi-annually every year ever since 1975. It's usually located in Tokyo Big Side in Ariake. Has anyone in this room been in Tokyo, actually? Have you seen this building before?
I have not. I was in a different part of Tokyo. I stayed in my Shibuya area.
Shibuya. Shibuya is really nice. I've been there a few times. But yeah, it was created by the Meikyu Circle. I'm not sure what works the Meikyu Circle had done, but they're mainly known for Comic Cat. And let's get into the blogger doujin culture, something that probably a lot of us is more used to. Even though there's still a lot of printed media still done in Japan, like the journals as well as like the magazines, a lot of works within the indie communities go onto the internet on websites such as Pixiv, Alice Books, Bella Books, and DL sites, mainly for Doujin, soft, or video games. Basically, Doujin soft and Doujin ongaku kind of rose in popularity as technology became more widespread and accessible for the general population, especially in the 1980s. Has anyone been onto any of these sites before? I highly recommend checking them out. They're pretty good, and yes, there's a lot of doujin that you're thinking of. There's also a lot of safe for work doujins that we're talking about today on these websites as well. I highly recommend checking these out if you want to support independent creators in Japan. Alright, so that's the look into the history lessons of doujins. For those who are a little late to the history lesson, we did make a recording of this, so you'll be able to catch up if you want to learn a little bit more of the background that led to doujin. But, speaking of history, let's talk about my history. And yes, that's what I looked like I was about 17 in that image, so that was 7 years ago exactly, because this was on my 17th birthday 7 years ago. I am 24 now. I gotten gray since then. I no longer have that Guy Fieri flair to me.
All from the stress.
Yep, all from the stress of game development.
Yay.
But yeah, when I was in high school when I looked like that was when I first heard the term Dōjin, and I thought it was all R18 words, so I'm like, oh, gross, I don't want to, see this sort of content. However, when I was in college, I was doing a lot of research into Japanese media, especially media that I especially enjoy, such as the When They Cry series and Toho. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Toho. Does anyone like Toho in here? What's your favorite character?
I mean, I enjoy the music for it.
The music is pretty good. Honestly, if someone said the music's their favorite character, that is A-okay. Like, that's probably everyone's favorite character as well. I am a big fan of Cherno. But yeah, when I learned that Toho and When They Cry are considered doujin works, I'm like, wait a second, these aren't R18. So I looked a little bit more into these materials. I'm like, oh, doujin means independently created projects that were self-published by the creators. And I'm like, oh, this is really much like the indie scene here in the West. And from there, I fell into a big rabbit hole. And let's move on to Josh's story with Dōjin.
Alright, so I also heard that the term Dōjin during high school and a little bit in middle school because I was kind of in that weird anime phase. Like, we've all been at that anime phase in middle school, right? Yeah, I've been there too. A little bit too deep in the trenches. I heard of the term fully in high school when I was transitioning as a freshman. So a lot of the time I've basically been seeing this being R18 due to the fact I'm in the LGBT community. We've seen a lot of doujins that are very not safe for work, but I'm also happy to find out that there were that are safe for work. I'm so happy about it because I like the option there. I never really interacted with the R18 stuff or not safe for work because I wasn't really looking into it a lot. I just see it at a glance. I'm like, okay, but I walk past it. However, in college, I learned from Michael and everyone else what the official term is, and was also learning to it more during like a video I was binge watching my dinner.
We all watch videos while, eating dinner.
What else other entertainment is there? But I really got into like mangas and mangas during this time, mainly the reincarnated villainous trope because I really like that sweet revenge trope. It's so nice. But literally 5 days ago, when I was just scrambling to see what counts as Dōjin of the media that I've been like taking in, I was like, oh, I realized the vocalized songs I daydream with and validated the daydream with, and mangas that I've seen count as Dōjin.
Yep, I was the one who was telling him this 5 days ago in the Discord chat. But yes, since we went into our history about us and Dōjin and Dōjin media, let's talk about our favorite Dōjin media and Dōjin artists that are safe for work, by the way. But yeah, some of my favorite works of Dōjin are Higurashi no Rakugo ni. Like, I grew up with the story. I was probably a little bit too young to be watching Higurashi when they cry. However, when I was in college, I really started getting into the visual novel. I'm also a big fan of the Toho Project. Again, I'm wearing a shirt of Cherno right now. And I'm also a big fan of Kishida Kyoden Nakasobi Rockets. As I mentioned earlier in this panel, Kishida Kyoden and the Nakasobi Rockets are the producers of music that has been used in anime such as Gate and High School of the Dead. They make a lot of Dōjin works and a lot of songs based off of Dōjin media. And as I mentioned earlier before, one of my favorite Dōjin artists is Pampanya. They make a lot of personal manga stories about their normal life in Japan as well as their travels around the world. They have a really beautiful short story called Gugubano Holiday, where they go to the Philippines to find their favorite fruit that they found in Japan that they couldn't get anymore. And they learned, oh, it's in the Philippines. And also, Pampanya is noted to be one of the most notable non-binary artists in Japan.
So as for me, Michael was going more onto like the manga, but as well with more visual novels. I was more of the gamer kind of person. So I have a list. So for some of like the readings and mangas of visual arts, my brother's husband, as we all saw before, by Gengoro Tagame, and as well, This Bride Was a Boy, another LGBT related manga that I also love so much, by the artist Chi. I've also found out that the song from Mesmerizer from Satsuki, they do count due to them basically being an independent publisher, and Rolling Girl Wawaka, independent artist, and the games such as the RPG horror such as Eve, Mad Father. I'm not so sure, so people can correct me on this. Misao, I'm not sure.
I think originally Misao was, and then they got picked up by a publisher for the full edition.
Gotcha.
Does anyone like to share their favorite Dōjin media before we continue?
Oh yeah, when they cry is good, but I didn't know it was a Dōjin, so.
Oh yeah, it was originally a Dōjin made by Rikishi 90 or Rikishi 07, and all of his work was originally shared on Comiket. Like his entire family actually helped him make all of his original DVDs and helped him sell and all that. Like his father did all the research for some of the more obscure stuff, such as police procedure in Japan, because he did cover that content within the original visual novel. They didn't really get publishers until they went to the PS2, which was around 2006 when the anime first came out. And Rikishi is still doing Dōjin media with this series Umineko coming out much later after Higurashi. Does anyone know about Umineko? Yeah. If you like Higurashi, you will also like Umineko. Basically, Umineko is a murder mystery that takes place in a mansion far off in the southern part of Japan, and it's a really amazing story. I can't really say too much of the plot because it's best experienced by going in blind. Kind of like I did when I first started recording myself play it, and I'm 200 hours in. The documentation of me playing the game on YouTube is there forever. There's over 200 hours of me streaming.
You still continue on to this game?
Yep, I'm actually doing a stream this Monday of episode 8 of Umineko. I am close to the finale line. But yeah, he's also working on a story called Kikonia. It's on a long-term hiatus because Kikonia intentionally talks about the world conflicts 2 years before the world conflicts occurred during the COVID-19 pandemic. So Rikishi decides to stop telling that story. He's like, uh-oh, I told a story that was too true to life. And Rikishi, in terms of non-Dōjin work, he's actually the writer of Silent Hill F. If anyone's interested in Silent Hill F, he's the writer of it. And the story's gonna be pretty messed up.
He's involved in it, it's gonna hurt.
Yeah. Are you ready to get hurt? Like Silent Hill F. So this next slide kind of goes into how the West kind of sees Dōjin. This has kind of been that theme we've been talking about throughout this panel, but a lot of people in the West, from what we have observed, and we are all also we're also big victims of this ourselves. We mainly saw Dōjin as mainly adult content, since we see a lot of adult content within Dōjin. Like whenever you hear the word, everyone makes the face up. Oh yeah, I know what Dōjin is. They also, many people believe that Dōjin's only sold in Japan at Comic-Con, which is like the big convention for Dōjin, and it's very unpolished work, and it's not worth checking out. If you say this last one, get out. But yeah, I do have a few personal theories as to why this happened. Like, at any time you could also tell me your theories, Josh, about how this has happened. But a lot of the reasons why I feel like Dōjin media has seen this way in the West is mistranslations of sources. A lot of times there's fan translations, and don't get me wrong, fan translations can be really good, but they can also be very bad. Basically, there's a lot to do with localization. A lot of localization, which is like basically very Japanese terms being brought into a Western audience that might not be as familiar with them. There's a hard way of translating stuff across two totally different cultures. Like, there's some things that are fairly common in Japan that in America are just like, I don't get it. Especially with puns and jokes. Is anyone a fan of the Monogatari series? Oh yeah. The Monogatari series is a huge victim of this. And yeah, there's basically a lack of translation of a lot of Dōjin media, mainly due to the artists not having the resources to get their works out there to people in the West. Like, they're mainly within Japanese communities, and they can't really have a lot of foreign outreach. And another reason why I think the term Dōjin's kind of been, I don't want to say the word tarnished, because it's not really tarnished, because R18 works are still great works. However, there's been a lot of misuse by influencers that made the term Dōjin, which is independent works by independent artists who independently publish them, to just being R18 works. I'm not going to say any influencers' names. I am not getting myself into that sort of rabbit hole. However, in a lot of media that you see online about Dōjins, they only talk about those kind of Dōjins, and they usually only kind of treat Dōjin as kind of like a joke of R18 works. Like, that's a whole thing you could get into, of saying there's a huge joke of R18 works, because there's a lot of R18 works that are really great media that has that sort of content within it. And my last point is, many times when these works are published in the West by companies, it can lead to a perception that the manga was originally coming from a publisher like Kodansha or Shonen Jump. Kodansha publishes Shonen Jump. I kind of miscommunicated that, but yeah, a lot of times whenever these works are published in the West by big publishers here, many people think it came from a Japanese publication. Do you have any thoughts about how Dōjin's image kind of became more something like R18 works here in the West?
I think it's probably because a lot of fan works, you can't really stop the fans whatever they can fully do. You can advise them to not do things, however, they're still going to do it. Check out a lot of fandoms that you have seen that have been basically saying please don't make NSFW of things. They're still going to sadly make a lot of NSFW things. So for me, I kind of would think it's probably a lot of oversaturation of said Dōjins basically being a lot of NSFW and things like that, which is sadly, that's the only spotlight that Dōjin has. Or rephrasing, a lot of Dōjin has been oversaturated with a lot of non-safe work, where the safe work is practically beneath, basically buried under that whole pile, which is sad. So I'm happy that a lot of Dōjins are basically being shown up as safe work and have fun to read and things like that.
Yeah. And of course, I actually have a thing that we can do to help redeem Dōjin's image. One of the first things is give these original artists a chance to support them. Go on Pixiv, go on the L site, pick up something that you think is interesting to look at, being oh, this might be a really cool thing for me to check out. And a lot of times it will be safe for work material, or if you're really into NSFW material, I'm not going to stop you, I'm not going to judge, but I also do recommend checking out the safe for work materials, as a lot of these works are just from independent creators that want to get their works out there and not have to deal with publishers or their works being changed just to fit within an agenda of someone who is financially supporting them. If fans financially support them themselves, authors will be able to create the stories that they want to create. Yeah, I also heard the squeal outside. I don't know what that's about. And also, I'm also encouraging everyone to share your own creative works, as well as like your favorite works with your friends and online communities. Like do stuff like fan art of these works, reviews of the works, as well as commentary videos. I have a big background in doing YouTube content. That kind of is the reason why I'm kind of doing the YouTuber impression right now, because I do a lot of YouTube videos about my favorite media. If you see any video about Higurashi, 1 in 4 chance it's probably me talking about it, because I've made a lot of videos about Higurashi in the past, as well as supporting your own local communities wanting to create their own published works. Who in here creates, their own art or creates their own media? Yeah, start supporting, local communities and sharing your work within your community. Like, we highly encourage you to share your own independent works and, get the word out there of other people as well. And the last point, which is probably the hardest point, is learning a little bit of Japanese to interact with Dōjin communities. Dōjin communities always want to reach out to Western audiences, however, there's a big language barrier. If you're willing to, take the effort, like you can even do 5 minutes of lessons on Duolingo a day to learn a little bit of Japanese to get in contact with Japanese artists. Do you have any recommendations to help, redeem Dōjin's image?
Not entirely, besides what was shown here, but obviously support the artist, whoever you like, as long as they're doing normal stuff or something like that. Sorry, it's been a long day. But essentially, yeah, support artists, small artists, even sometimes big artists. But overall, just with even a small little help, it does actually push it a little bit closer towards that spotlight that we everybody need.
Yeah. And also, last but not least, we got to do a little bit of self-plugging because we are ourselves Dōjin artists ourselves. So as we earlier showed in the slides, we represent our studio, Cozy Crow Studio, which is an independent game development studio located here in the Midwest. We also have plans to share more of our favorite Dōjin works with online communities at events such as WeebCon, as well as cook up new ideas for supporting indie creators and also sharing our own works. With this video game studio, as I mentioned prior, we aim to create fun experiences for players to immerse themselves in. We recently released a few weeks ago an independent horror game called Desecration. It's kind of based off of the PS1 era style horror games that we've been seeing online recently, such as Mouthwashing, as well as the works of Trellis Arts, as well as Ireland. Those were huge influences for the team for Desecration, and after 2 years of production, we were able to release our first game on Steam. That's only $4. It's really cheap if you'd like to check it out. And we're also currently working on our next game, Crow Ice, which I feel like Josh should explain that one a bit more.
Well, Crow Heist is essentially my senior capstone. I am a game design student. Michael's already graduated.
Yeah.
Anyways, Crow Heist, you get to play as our mascot Crowley, the little crow, who has unfortunately had the HOA break down his nest due to the fact that it has already a lot of their things in it. He wakes up, broke his wing, found out all of his treasures are gone, and now it's up to you to break into the HOA members' homes and steal all their stuff in order to rebuild your nest. We plan to have at least a lot of funny interactions, some chaotic interactions such as throwing knives at a wall, probably getting glitter everywhere, splatting paint onto Crowley, throwing him against a canvas, having a Crowley splatter paint onto the canvas. But anyways, as Cozy Crow Studios is, we like to do a little bit of horror, we like to do a little bit of cozy. Desecration is the horror, Crow Heist is the cozy. But yeah, we plan to have that at least at 2027. We're still working on it, we're moving along.
Oh yeah, it's going to be a lot of work, more 60 hours weeks ahead of both of us.
Cheers to that!
Woo! But yeah, if you'd like to check out our works as well as just see the Crow Ice trailer as well as checking out Desecration, this QR code right here is for the feedback form of both this panel and our socials. So now we're going to open up for Q&A if anyone has any questions for us or would like to share their own Dōjin works as well.
What's the best Dōjin you would recommend?
The When They Cry series. I have to say it. When They Cry.
Other than that
Higurashi,
one.
Umineko, fully recommend them.
Okay.
But yeah.
What was the second one?
Umineko When They Cry. Yep, that's the next work by Rikishi Nanazero, who made Higurashi. It's a bit more based off of Western mystery tropes. However, it has a really cool witch named Beatrice in the story, and If you like stories of witches, killing people, you will like Umineko.
Gotcha. All right, thanks for the recommendation.
Yeah, no problem.
You
Thank
guys
you for
have a good
coming to our
one.
panel. All right, thank you all for attending today. If you have any further questions or feedback for us, feel free to reach out to us on social media through this QR code right here. Thank you all for attending.